Hello everyone, welcome back to our Azure Container App series. In this video, we'll talk about the prerequisites you need before creating your first ACA environment. We won't dive into how to install each tool. Instead, I'll explain what each one does and why you need it. You can find links to installation guides for each one of these tools in the video description below. Or if you already have your local environment set up, you can go ahead and skip this video and join us in the next one when we start to get hands-on with the Azure portal. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which tools are required, what they do, and why they're essential for working with Azure Container Apps. We'll show you where to find the detailed instructions in the description, and if you need to install or update anything else on your local machine. Let's begin with the most fundamental requirement, an Azure subscription. You'll need to create and run resources in Azure, including container apps. If you don't have one, you can begin by signing up for a free trial. But the key point is no subscription, no ACA. It's that simple. If you are a student, Microsoft has free student credits that you can use to start playing around with Azure. Next is the Azure CLI. This is Microsoft's command line for interfacing and for managing Azure resources. You'll use it to create and configure environments, set up networking, and more. Essentially, the Azure CLI is your remote control for all things Azure, letting you script or type commands instead of clicking around in the portal. Then there's Docker. If you plan to build and test your container images locally, Docker is the industry standard tool to package your application and its dependencies into a single portable unit. Even if you're not building images yourself, having Docker is often helpful for quick troubleshooting or local experimentation. Think of Docker as your container engine, ensuring that what runs on your machine will also run the exact same way in the cloud. You might also consider using VS Code, Visual Studio Code, with the Azure Tools extension, or any other IDE you prefer. VS Code in particular can streamline container development, auto-generate Docker files, and integrate directly with Azure. In addition, you'll have access to powerful tools such as GitHub Copilot. These features aren't strictly mandatory, but they can save a lot of time when you're deploying and managing container apps. Essentially, it's your productivity booster for coding and deployment. Finally, there's the Azure Developer CLI, often called AZD. This tool can automate much of the container app setup, from environment creation to deployment pipelines. If you're someone who loves infrastructure as code approaches, AZD can be a real game changer. It's optional, but for advanced scenarios, it can drastically simplify your workflow. Now, many of you might be wondering if there's any big differences between Windows and Mac OS setups. Generally speaking, each tool, Azure CLI, Docker, VS Code, they offer installations for packages tailored to your operating system, and the usage remains practically the same across platforms. But you'll find slight differences in how you download and launch them. For instance, Windows users often rely on MSI installers or exe files, while Mac OS users can use Homebrew or drag and drop .dmg files. Either way, once these tools are installed, they will work similarly on both platforms, and links can be found in the description of the video. So now you know why these tools are important for Azure Container Apps. In our next video, we'll create a resource group in Azure Portal and spin up our first ACA environment. After that, we will spin up our first environment using the Azure CLI and AZD. Whether you're on Windows or Mac OS, the steps will be nearly identical once your tools are set up. We'll also demonstrate both methods to give you the best of both worlds. Now here's a quick recap of the tools we covered. We talked about the Azure subscription, your pass to all Azure services including ACA. The Azure CLI, the command line gateway to creating and managing resources. Docker, the container engine for building, testing, and running your apps and containers. VS Code, which is a great productivity tool and helps simplify workflows with integration with Azure. The Azure Developer CLI, such as AZD, for powerful automating and creation and deployment of pipelines. Remember, we're not showing you how to install each tool step by step in this video. If you need help or documentation, you can check the links in the description below. Once everything is in place, you'll be ready to follow along in the next video as we configure our very first ACA environment. Thanks for watching. If you found this overview helpful, please like, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon to be up to date when we release new videos as part of the series, and I'll see you in the next video where the hands-on fun begins.